If you go to look for transportation crashes in Ireland, you won't find a lot of information. There was a few plane crashes around Shannon Airport in the earlier days of air travel. One such example is Pan Am Flight 110. It was on a round-the-world trip starting in San Francisco and eventually ending up in New York. It had had many stopovers, one being Shannon. Back in the day, Shannon Airport was one of the last places an aircraft could make landfall at an equipped airport before heading across the Atlantic to America. Planes back then had to refuel much more frequently than now, so Shannon became an incredibly busy spot. Pan Am 110 was one such plane. It had taken off from London, stopping at Shannon before leaving for its final destination in New York. Now, I'm wondering why it would need to refuel again in Shannon, as London is only a short hop. Or maybe it had to drop or collect passengers. Anyway, it was coming into land and it had a failed approach. On the second attempt, while lined up correctly, it fell short and hit a high fence. The plane ripped apart on impact and there was only one miraculous survivor. He was an employee and had removed his seatbelt when he knew they were going to crash. The tail fin broke away and he was thrown from the plane through the baggage hold, got up and walked away. This was one of several incidents around the busy hub that was Shannon. The most notable thing is that they were all passing through planes, none of which originated here. Aer Lingus is the national airline here, and from word go they are renowned for their excellent service and meticulous maintenance of their planes. There is only one fatal loss they have ever had, which is a pretty amazing record, and I know I'd much rather pay the extra few pounds to travel on their planes than the lower cost alternatives. It was the 1968 flight 712. The aircraft was a Viscount, and as Aer Lingus named their planes after saints, so to attain their blessing, this one was called St. Phelim. It was travelling from Cork to Heathrow, London, and not long into the journey they spoke to air traffic controllers. At this point all was well, then suddenly another transmission came through. 12,000 feet and descending, spinning rapidly. As they flew just off Tuskor Rock in Wexford, the aircraft broke up in mid-air and disappeared into the sea. There was no survivors. There was no black box either, so after 2 investigations, no cause was found. There were theories, some more likely than others. Military drones were ruled out, as was pilot error and mid-air collision. The most likely scenario based on a piece of the tail that was discovered on the flight path some distance away. This particular type of plane had issues with the door, and it was possible had this occurred and hit the tail, it would have left the plane uncontrollable. Another crash, although it didn't happen in Ireland, reached the headlines in 1984, just a year before the Air India mid-air explosion off the coast of Ireland in 1985. It's known as the Beaujolais Crash. It was a charter plane and was full of Irish journalists. They had an annual event where they went to France to sample and purchase wine at the start of the new season. The plane again broke up mid-air and parts of it were found as far as 4 miles away from the crash site on a hill in Eastbourne. The official report thought that the festive atmosphere on board may have distracted the pilots and they disengaged the autopilot without realising. But this plane also had no flight recorder, so we will never be certain. The most recent fatal crash in Ireland was in February 2011, Manx 2 Flight 7100 from Belfast to Cork. This one was indeed a crime. The thing is, it was a company only on paper. They didn't own any planes. Instead, they leased planes off other companies and flew them under their logo, luring people into a false sense of security. The crash plane's history shocked everyone, as it actually belonged to a Spanish bank, who leased it to a Spanish company, who subleased it to another company called Flightline, who managed the flight for Manx 2. Along the chain, maintenance records were sparse. No one really assumed responsibility, and the crew were often inexperienced and employed abroad. Not only this, they were expected to not only pilot the plane, they had to do the flight attendant's duties and to help load the plane too. The 2 pilots that day were both very inexperienced, and it's against regulations to pair these 2 together. During the day, the plane was commuter, and at night a freight plane, so it had to be reconfigured twice daily. On the morning of the crash, there was thick fog on takeoff at Belfast. By the time they reached Cork, it was worse, and reports say you couldn't see anything. Cork Airport is prone to fog at the best of times. The inexperienced crew were not qualified to land in these conditions. They simply didn't know how to. They tried 3 times and had 2 near misses on approach. The 3rd time, it's thought, they tried to power up and go around again, but lost control, plummeting into the ground and flipping over. Of the 12 on board, 6 perished, including the crew members. It was also avoidable. An interesting story I came across was in September 1961. A Starways DC-4 overshot the runway at Dublin Airport due to poor visibility from heavy rain. It crashed onto the main Dublin-Belfast road, a very busy road indeed, and slid along, damaging the aircraft beyond repair, yet no one died, either on the plane or the ground, which was miraculous. The passengers were returning from a pilgrimage in Lourdes, and the plane was full of holy relics and holy water. They attributed this to their protection. Interesting theory, but does that mean that Our Lady is a safer bet than one of the saints honoured by Aer Lingus? Certainly more effective than St. Phelim, it would seem. No offence meant.